Is it possible to travel in time? Obviously, we can travel forward in time at the usual speed, 1 second a second. But in this video, I'm going to delve into the science to work out if we can travel forwards and backwards in time
to speed up time, to
slow down time,
and eventually to stop it altogether. Then can we reverse it? Can we travel back in time? And if so, what happens if we change something back in our own history? Is it possible to travel in time? What happens if we change something back in our own history? What if we kill our grandparents? Well, aside from becoming a murderer, you would stop yourself from existing, or would you? Is it impossible, or is it just really, really difficult? All of that stuff coming up right after this. Hey everyone, welcome back. My name's Neil. So, can we travel in time? Is it possible? Well, let's cover off some of the basics first. What is time? And this is our first obstacle. What is time? Have a really good think about it. Do you have a definition for it? And if you do, put it down in the comments. When I first started looking into time travel for the purposes of this video, I got stuck on this because it's a weird idea. What is time? Most scientists agree that there is an arrow of time and that time flows, if that's the right word, in only one direction. You can't unexplode something. You can't unmelt an ice cube, for example, in a glass of water. Yes, of course you can refreeze things and you can mend things, but it'd take incredible skill, technology and patience to gather all of the helium atoms from a burst balloon and put them back into that original formation of stretched rubber. Scientists call this the arrow of time. Time has one direction and one direction only. It can be sped up and slowed down, and we can come to that in just a moment. Some people say that the arrow of time is inevitable and must move forward because of inertia. Others say that it's a consequence of entropy, a singular state of disorder that all things must move towards. Chaos, if you like. You see, atoms move when they get hot. They wobble and jiggle. That's why we have solids, liquids and gases. Hold on a second, because this is about time, I promise. Solids have a lot of atoms that don't move much. Liquids may well have the same number of atoms, but they have a bit more energy, and so their atoms can flow around. The atoms are a bit more spaced out. Gases have a lot more space between the atoms and a lot more energy, and are often bouncing pretty much all over the place. The arrow of time hypothesis suggests that when a single atom is isolated, it will cool, and when it cools, it slows down and stops moving. That's common physics. It loses its kinetic or movement energy to heat, which becomes universally distributed, and eventually it reaches an equilibrium where everything is the same temperature, and this is called the heat death of the universe. All energy simply becomes heat, but not very much heat. And everything is spread out enough that it won't react, and that's the end of our universe. Ah, crap. That's pretty bleak. Okay, so that's one theory. It's a common theory, but it's one theory. Recently, however, there are other theories that say other things. We know from Einstein that time can be stretched and contracted, and that gravity has a part to play in this. Time slows down as we approach the speed of light, or a body of mass, for example. Astronauts on the International Space Station experience a slower time to those on Earth because, number one, they're travelling faster than we are, but also because we are closer to the body of mass, in this case, the Earth. Shorter people experience time differently to taller people, but neither will ever really know any significant difference, even over a human lifespan, because the difference is so tiny. But speed of space travel has more of an effect. If we were able to travel at great speed, close to the speed of light for example, time would slow down for us, or rather, external time would speed up for others. Now, the risk of making a bad joke is all relative. And I mean that literally, because if we went at a light speed trip, we could head out and back to the nearest star system, and by the time we get back, our time would be pretty much instantaneous, but almost 9 years would have passed on Earth. At 99% the speed of light, a 5-year trip would correspond to 40 years on Earth. Yes, A fast vehicle is a time machine to the future, and I'm talking super fast though, like faster than humans have ever gone before. For example, the International Space Station is travelling incredibly quickly. It has to in order to stay in orbit. It's zipping around at around 7.6 kilometers per second. That's zippy. Yet astronauts travelling at that speed for 6 months will experience a time dilation of only a fraction of a second compared to those on Earth. The differences are small, but our own satellites need to compensate for that difference in time to make sure that we know where we are at the right point in space. And this is the second point when it comes to time travel. Space and time are the same thing. And I know that sounds strange, but time really is the fourth dimension of space. We have up, down, left, right, forward and backwards in space, and speed of movement or time. The Earth is moving through space right now. We can't feel it because everything where you are right now is moving at roughly the same speed, and so it feels like we're sat still, but we're not. If we were, would time stop? It's all relative. An annoying answer that poses no actual answers. So here's the thing. Can we travel in time? Simple answer is yes. We move through time, but that's not what you mean, is it? We can more easily travel through time at what might be considered a normal rate than anything else. It's the default rate of speed. We can speed this up with relative ease by moving faster through space, but if you're looking for a Back to the Future style time machine to go forward and backwards in time, you need to realise that time and space are the same. If you want to travel in time, you need to be able to travel in space. I did a video a long time ago on this channel where I spoke about teleportation being necessary for time travel, but it's more than that. That video's up there, by the way. Travelling backwards in time requires a folding of space-time. Imagine space-time like a piece of paper. Let's draw an arrow on it. The common theory goes that you can contract space-time like this, but the arrow stays in one direction. You can extend space-time or stretch it, but that arrow keeps going in that same direction. Perhaps it should look more like an elastic band or a piece of rubber, but let's stick with the paper for now. If space-time is like that paper, can't it just be bent in half? Can't the arrow then point in the opposite direction? And even if the arrow of time needs to stay pointing forwards, can't we bend the time and then hop over the gap? Well, a recent PhD paper in the Journal of Classical and Quantum Gravity describes how to build a time machine using a very simple construction. There is a small caveat though. The paper, titled Closed Time-like Curves and Effective Superluminal Travel with Naked Line Singularities, really catchy, explains how to make a time machine to travel back into the past. Whether anyone has actually ever done this yet remains unclear, but let's look at what might happen if they did. The paper... What do you mean you haven't read it? It's publicly available. The link's down in the description. Go check it out. Not yet. The paper is written by Caroline Mallory, Gaurav Khanna, and Richard H. Price at the University of Massachusetts in America. It talks about the cosmic censorship hypothesis, where it explains that the closed time-like curves, that is the gateway to travel into the past, are hidden within black holes. Black holes have a singularity, an infinitely dense amount of matter, where space and time converge, because space and time are all the same thing. Gravity is also infinitely dense, and not even light or time can escape. These closed time-like curves, therefore, could provide a gateway, albeit a hidden one, into any point in time or space. The problem is that you and I are made of matter, and by entering a black hole, it would crush the life support system for our consciousness that we call our human bodies. The paper explains that ring singularities exist within black holes, but are unobservable because of the event horizon, and that means that that's the point at which everything is unobservable. You can't see it because light can't get out. But it then goes on to say that it's unclear as yet whether a naked singularity might exist outside of black holes, and these things are observable. Okay, so let's take a little break here because I know that all of the science and long words is probably getting a little much. So let's summarise it so far. We can travel forward in time and can travel faster and faster and faster in order to go further and further into the future by slowing down time relative to us. Simple-ish. But how do we go back? Well, before I get to that, and yes, I shall get back to that in a second, I wanted to go over a very slight tangent. It's important to the overall story here, but bear with me. You may remember last week's video about Bob Lazar. Linked up there. In it, I explained how Bob Lazar worked in Area 51, backwards engineering spacecraft not made on this Earth. If you haven't seen that video yet, check it out. It's going to blow your mind. Something that I hadn't really thought about to include last week was Bob's really interesting explanation of exactly what these alien propulsion systems that he was dissecting looked like. He described it like a half basketball and a cylinder. So imagine a basketball the size of a basketball made out of metal, and then the whole thing sliced in half. And a cylinder, kind of like this. Except this picture, this is where we come back to the time travel paper. Are you worried yet? This diagram is taken directly from the Massachusetts paper about how to make a time machine. The other thing I just quickly wanted to mention, and this was unscripted, so if I go off on one, I'm really sorry about it, but in the paper it talks about how each of the cars or each of the time machines that they're proposing to make in the paper requires a singularity, and that would be essentially a black hole within that machine. The problem with black holes tends to be the gravity. Now, if you have a huge amount of gravity, it's just going to pull everything into it and it's going to crush that machine. So, how do you do that? So you need to overcome gravity. How would you do that? Well, if you look at the Bob Lazar video from last week, he suggests that the aliens have already created an anti-gravity machine. If you can control gravity, you can not only create a singularity at will, but you can also counteract it. Now, whether or not you just take one off the shelf and plonk it into a time machine and then counteract the gravity until you need it, I don't know. I would imagine it's probably an inefficient way of doing it. What you could use instead is a gravity generator that generates that singularity as and when you need it. That would make more sense to me. So what I'm saying is this singularity in a time machine may not necessarily be unobtainable. Do aliens have this technology? There's a theory that these creatures are actually humans from the future, and is that so unreasonable to... Okay, I know I'm getting a bit off topic here, so maybe that's better for a different video. Let's get back to time travel. Now, I'm not going to dissect the paper in depth. I strongly encourage you to check out the link so that you can go directly to the original source and read that for yourself. But let's just say that we can go back in time. Let's say it's possible. What now? So you've gone back maybe 80 years and you decide to visit an old English pub because the whole reason that you're there is because you're inspired by this awesome video to visit England before you hopped in your time machine. I know that's egocentric. You get into a disagreement with my grandfather and end up accidentally, or let's be honest, on purpose, killing him. Would that be a paradox? Well, it would, because you went to that place because I told you to, then you killed one of my ancestors so that my parents could have never conceived me, and so you couldn't have watched this video to inspire you to go back in time. And this is called the grandfather paradox, and it's quite famous, but it takes whatever guise you like, but essentially talks about something enabling your time travel being removed in the past by the person that's travelling. So if you killed your own ancestor, or prevented electricity from ever being discovered, or killed the person who invents time travel. Why so much killing? What would happen then? Well, Doc Brown has one explanation, and yes, this is where Back to the Future Part 2 does explain how timelines can split into two different realities. In quantum mechanics, this is called the collapse of the wave function of the universe, and it happens at every quantum event, theoretically, where something springs off an alternative universe, and it seems to me the most logical answer to what would happen if the grandfather paradox ever happened. You, travelling back in time, would then be your future, and while you would appear to have never existed when you come back to your own reality, you would have caused another universe to have been created, one without you in it, and one in which you can't escape. It wouldn't actually contravene physics for you to still be in that universe, even though you killed the people who made your birth possible, because your own conception and birth would still exist in the past, but it's the past of another universe, another dimension, if you like. So that adds more weight to this multiverse theory, but it would mean that you could never really get home because it's in a different dimension. So please don't kill anyone. If you like this video, please click that like button. It tells YouTube that it was a good video and more people should see it. Please subscribe and ding that bell, and by dinging the bell, you'll be notified each time I go live or upload anything. A massive shout out to these amazing people. They're my patrons and members from Patreon and YouTube, and without their help, I would have stopped doing this channel ages ago. You can become one of these awesome people by using the links down below. I'll be back next time with some more magical awesomeness, but until next time, as always,
stay magical.